everyone. You don't have to say, that felt like you should all say good morning, miss, didn't it? I think this is very nearly a full house, which is quite incredible. So it's lovely to see everybody. Welcome to the Peak District LAF meeting, 12th of June, 2024. Mike, any apologies?
Hello, everyone. Not quite a full house. We have apologies from Jess Kenyon, and you will notice Jess is here. I thought you said you weren't coming. Well, we have very nearly a full house, but you will notice by the quietness of the room that Ben Seal isn't here. He's the only one that sent his apologies.
That's great, thank you. I believe he's cycling up something in the Alps, I think. That's his excuse. It's very nice. Minutes of the meeting, the last meeting. Did everyone receive a copy of the minutes? Did anybody have any questions or corrections on any aspect of the minutes? Are we happy then to take them as a true record of the meeting? Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Thank you. Matters arising that aren't covered in the agenda. So we talked about the recreation hubs, and I think we're probably going to get a report back on those as they progress later into the year. I don't think we've got an update on them this time, but I think that work's ongoing as part of the National Park Management Plan work. Thanks again to Charlotte and Craig for your presentations from the perspective of land managers. I think it really, I had lots of comments afterwards about it. It's just really, it opens everybody's eyes to those challenges, but also I think, as Craig underlined, the opportunities and the ways to work together as well. So that was really helpful. Charlotte?
Yeah, just as a quick update on my report, the NFU have published the statistics for the 2023. So livestock worth of estimated at 2.4 million was severely injured or killed by dogs in 2023, and that's up from 1.8 million the previous years. So I think it just goes to show that it is an ongoing problem and something that is of great concern to the farming community. So thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that UK-wide?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Charlotte. And I know those are things that have come up in other meetings that I've been in with land managers around the peak, around dogs in general, and also commercial dog walking and other challenges. So maybe it's something we might come back to as a laugh at some point in the future. Martin?
Good morning, everyone. Chair, just under item 7, I was asked to draft a letter from Jill's report, which it did get drafted and sent, but I think between myself and Louise, we arrived and went on holiday on the same day, and something seems to have gone awry, so I'll send it round and we'll see if we can do that straight after this meeting.
That's great, thank you, Martin. And on item 6 from the last meeting, the details of the long-term directions at Deer Hill, Diggle and West Nab. We did that and we sent those responses out, and then there is I think, amendment on West Nab, which Sue is going to bring to the meeting under item 9 later. Thanks again to everybody who responded to that, and I think that was yes, that was everything. So yeah, thank you for that. 4, Chair and Vice Chair.
I arranged at the end of the last meeting that Louise's term as chair is coming to an end, and this is her last meeting. She has been chair for 2 years now, and has said she didn't want to carry on, which is her prerogative, of course. So we are required by regulations to have a chair and vice chair of the Local Access Forum. We currently have no nominations. So, the big question is anybody willing to put their hand in the air and say, I'll be chair? You've had opportunity to do so, nobody has done so yet. I would very much welcome somebody standing as chair.
It's probably a rubbish idea, but the reason I've been on the LAF for yonks, like geological ages, and the reason the reason I've never stood as chair is not the meeting, but the kind of in between meeting stuff that really the chair. I mean, obviously the chair drives the meeting, but the chair very much takes the responsibility for the work in between meetings. I don't think I could be the chair for a year or two. But I wondered if we could, if nobody super wants to take it on either, could we take it in turns? So somebody chairs the meeting and they're responsible for chairing that meeting and for all of the interim work up until the point of the next meeting, at which another chair takes that next third of the year, because I think I could do that. And I don't know if other people would find that a more attractive option or something that they could do.
You're looking at me for an answer. I'm kind of thinking of Have I Got News for You? You know what I mean? Where they rotate the chair. And have been doing very successfully for a very, very long time. I'm perfectly content with that suggestion. The only reason I'm hesitating is it's the forum to decide, not the secretary. I don't want to appear pedantic and... it's for you guys to decide who you want to be your chair, not for me to decide who's going to be chair. If everyone around this table is happy with that suggestion, then rock and roll as far as I'm concerned. It will require, of course, somebody to say, I'll be the next chair. So we're going to have an item on the agenda each time at the end of the meeting saying, who's going to be the chair of the next meeting, and then I'll know who to contact for anything that prior to the meeting. So if everyone's happy for that to work like that, yes, Dave.
Would you mind outlining the responsibilities in between meetings of the chair of this group, please?
I think that question should be directed to the chair.
I was going to do so. So I guess the key thing is agenda setting with the team here. So there's a pre-meeting before where we all get together. So myself, the vice chairs, Mike, Jill, Sue, and Andy Farmer to talk about what are we going to talk about in the meeting. That's about a month before, and then that all gets circulated to you guys. And if you guys want to add anything in, you can add things as kind of members' updates. So there's that element. There's the element of and some of that comes from the team. So obviously Sue has brought stuff to the meeting this time around, things like West Nab, and also Andy has suggested that Tim and Matthew will come and talk to us about active travel, and some of that comes from us as the kind of members saying, actually we want to have a theme like last time on land management, and we sort of pull that together. So there's that side of it. And then there's reviewing the minutes after the meeting that they're correct before they go out to everybody else. And then if there are things like TROs and directions, I've then done that process of contacting everybody, getting everybody's feedback, putting that letter together and kind of making sure it goes to the right people. Ah, Paul, we really have got very nearly a full house now. Hello. And so I do that as chair, partly because the letter goes from me as chair. Although thinking about it, actually, that particular process could be done by anyone as long as the kind of chair signs it off. And then if there are questions that come in about the LAF, often Mike will copy those into me, or anything that comes in. There's not a lot of those kinds of official things that I'm aware of. I know when John was chair, there were more things around the National Park Management Plan that were going on, and he was more involved in some of those things. But there hasn't been as much of that in the last 2 years.
Any more questions?
It was Nick.
It's not a question, suggestion on choosing a chair could be alphabetical. Fairly simple.
Whichever puts me later on.
He was suggesting to do it in alphabetical order. which would put Martin first. Yeah, that's one way to do it, particularly if you haven't got anybody who's coming forward necessarily and saying, or only voluntold, I think. Any thoughts from anyone else on?
What's the date of the next meeting? September.
September the 11th, sorry.
Is it September and then
October 16th.
October and then February?
Yeah, 3 meetings a year, October,
Yeah.
February, June. We're going to aim for.
So I'll put my name down for one of those two, either the October one or the February one. I don't mind. Well, I mean, obviously, I will nominate myself. I mean, people have to. I'm not just going, I'll do it.
Oh, I don't know. Thank you, Claire. Sue?
Thank you. I'd just like to say that in this last year, the Local Access Forum has been identifying themes. So, Claire, you've got an interest in health and wellbeing, and that's the theme for the October meeting.
Yeah.
So I think you've nominated yourself. but the Local Access Forum agrees amongst themselves what the themes are going to be for the coming year, and at such time, then the chair could be nominated, or someone could volunteer for the chair. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that, Sue. That sounds good. It requires us to have a theme, of course. Well, we need the end of the meeting. We're going to have to identify a theme and B, the person appropriate to chair that meeting. So it will require us to have a standing item at the end of each meeting to have a theme and a chair selected. So we just need to make sure we acquire time for that.
Or if possible, you could do it. So at the next meeting, if we came with the themes for the next 3 meetings, you could ask at that point for 3 people to chair each of those meetings. So you could try to do them a little bit in advance. I think, not to put you on the spot, Charlotte, but I think you'd said you'd be willing to chair the next meeting. Is that still correct? I don't want to put you on
yeah. Well, I mean, yes, whatever. I'm quite happy to do that. It's just not taking on the whole role, which I think it's sort of just thinking about having a rotating chair. I can't really speak for Martin, my fellow vice chair, but I think that would provide the continuity, because I think Martin and I are both happy to carry on as vice chair. So some things will pass from meeting to meeting, and I think that could then be a helpful role for the vice chairs to just keep up to date and on that, and just hold that continuity together. But yeah, I think in principle, I think this is all going to work very well, and we can only give it a go and just see how it works. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Charlotte. So my thought was, particularly as if the theme of the next meeting is health and well-being, we might actually want Claire to speak rather than necessarily chair. So I was thinking perhaps if we could say that Charlotte would chair the next meeting, and at that meeting perhaps we could help put themes together for the next meeting. Claire was happy to do the February one, and then we'd be looking for someone for the meeting in a year. So you've got a whole 12 months for someone to think about whether they would be happy to chair a meeting. Or ideally they would sort of know by the next meeting if we put those themes out. Does that sound like a workable solution? Does anyone have any objections to us proceeding in that way? Are you clear what we're saying, Mike?
You clear what we're saying, I'm clear. I'm clear about the situation of voting chair. I'm clear about Charlotte chairing the next meeting with a theme of health and well-being, and then we're going to take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you, Claire.
Can I just have a show of hands so that everybody accepts that as a way forward, please? Anyone against? No. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very
and before
much.
we sign off on item 4, I just would like to say a personal thanks for Louise for being chair for the last 2 years. It was very difficult, if you remember, 2 years ago when COVID was coming to an end, and John Thompson sadly passed away, and things were all quite difficult for me. I'm very grateful to Louise for standing in as chair at that point, and for what she's done over the last 2 years, and much appreciated. We'll give you a formal thank you at the end of the meeting. But I just thought I'd minute my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. If anyone's thinking of doing it, chairing the meetings is great because everyone's got so much to contribute. So yeah, I would definitely say. I mean, for me, because I work for myself, it's mostly a time thing. So 2 years has been great, but longer than that starts to become a bit challenging. I think the idea of sharing the burden is a really good one, and particularly if we've got that continuity from if Charlotte and Martin or anybody else is happy to sort of play that role at vice chair, then I think that's that feels like a good way forward. Great, thank you. So next we have our presentation on active travel. So we've got Tim and Matthew. If you want to kind of come forward, I'll get out of the way. I think, Tim, we've met you before, haven't we? You've presented to us before, but Matthew, you're new since, I think, the last time that we had this topic at the LAF. So, yeah, maybe welcome and tell us all about your role.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you. Sorry, Mike.
Can everybody see the screen all right?
Yeah.
I'm going to
Side out the way. I'll come this side.
It's a nice big screen, I hope you realise. It's brand new today. So if it doesn't work, well, I don't know what to do.
Can everyone hear me okay if I don't stand in front of the screen and use the mic? You okay with that? Okay. Thank you for inviting us here today. I think it's probably about 2 years ago that I was last here to speak to you, and we've moved things on quite a bit since then. So I'm going to start off. I'm Tim Nicholson. I'm the Transport Policy Planner for the Peak District National Park Authority. Now I'll introduce you to Matthew, who is the Sustainable Travel Officer, and he will tell you a little bit about some of the work that he's been doing. Thanks, Mike. Okay, so just a little bit of an introduction. Firstly, I'll give you some background to the Peak District Sustainable Transport Project. Then Matthew will take you through some of the delivery of the project, the early stages, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about our plans for the National Park Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan that myself and Sue have been particularly involved in. I'm sure that Sue will pick me up if I forget anything, and I may do. And then we'll tell you about what we think the Local Access Forum can do to help us to develop our local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, a lot of chances are you will have seen a version of this slide before. Things have changed a little bit since last time. So, as you know, with the original national park from 1951, we still have 11 constituent authorities, 7 highway authorities, 6 transport authorities, but we now form part of 4 mayoral combined authorities as well. And we've got Transport for North and Midlands Connect, so not at all complicated for us. According to the census, about 13.5 million people live within 1 hour's drive by car to the national park boundary. Prior to COVID, we thought there were approximately 26 million visits per year, roughly half and half between ones of 3 hours or more or 3 hours and less. We think that this figure certainly increased in the aftermath of COVID. And around that time, about 81% of visits were made by private car. So this equates to 21 million two-way car-borne visitor journeys every year, or 42 million in total. And again, we think that proportion has shifted a little bit over the last couple of years, and certainly since COVID, just on the basis of the overall traffic flows and the fact that we know that some of the bus services aren't carrying as many people and there's less of them operating. So back in January 2022, which was short before I spoke to you last time, I'd taken a report to our Programmes and Resource Committee seeking funding for a post to help us to lead on sustainable travel for the National Park Authority. And at that meeting, the report was relatively well received, but I was kind of told to go away and find out some more information before they were prepared to consider funding a post. Thank you. So what we did were 2 areas of research, and they both took place during the autumn and early winter of 2022. So the first one that we did, we were looking at public transport accessibility. So we've got the national park there on the slide, and a load of dots which represent random postcodes which we generated. And what we're looking at was how easy it was to get to some key destinations in the national park from those postcodes by public transport. We had quite a strict criteria. So none of the postcodes were in the national park itself. Both legs of the journey had to be made on a Saturday by scheduled public transport. The outbound journey could not start before 9 AM, and the return journey had to get you back to your home by no later than 5 PM. We were looking for a minimum dwell time of 2 hours at the destination, and the journey could not involve more than 30 minutes walking as part of either the outbound or the inbound journey. So walking to your bus stop, walking from the bus stop to where you wanted to be at your destination. And the journey was calculated using Google Maps, and it was the quickest journey that came up, unless that included more than 30 minutes of walking. So we got 138 randomly generated postcodes, and the destinations were Bakewell as our only town, 10 popular Peak District villages, and 10 popular Peak District recreation hubs, which are kind of shown on the slide there. Thanks, Mark. So we had a total of almost 3,000 journeys, 2,898, that could be made between those postcodes and the 21 locations. And only 23% of those could be made by public transport within that criteria. So the slide shows the accessibility of locations within the survey. There are only 4 from which more than half of the potential journeys to them could be made by public transport. So they were Hathersage, Bakewell, Chatsworth and Longshore, which had pretty reasonable access. But there were 6 locations that could not be accessed at all directly by scheduled public transport, or without more than 30 minutes walking as part of this. And these were Alstonfield, Dovedale, Parsley Hay, Roaches, Stanage and Trentabank in the Macclesfield Forest. There were some anomalies around accessibility at the time, largely due to the railway industrial action that was taking place, so that affected some of them, and particularly we think it affected the journeys from Edale, which we would have expected to have fared better. Thanks, Ryan. So some maps there, just kind of giving an idea of where these locations could easily be accessed from. Okay, it's kind of shown as straight lines, but obviously public transport journeys are never made in a straight line. But these are kind of the ones where we got most of the journeys going to, so Bakewell, Castleton, Chatsworth, Hathersage. Thanks, Mike. And 3 more there, Longshore, Derwent and Langsett. The Langsett one's particularly interesting because it was way easier to get there from Greater Manchester and meet the criteria than it was from Sheffield. And it's largely because there is a very good bus service that goes across to Holmfirth and then you can connect back down. Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, so the average findings from this, and they are averages. Outbound and inbound legs each involved about 3 separate public transport services. The round trip would normally include up to 23 minutes of walking to and from home and public transport stops. The average total travel time was 3 hours and 49 minutes, and the average time available at the destination was 3 hours and 17 minutes. That's right. So we did a bit of a comparison to see what it was like in terms of 1 hour travel time to Bakewell. As you can see, the one on the left is the public transport, relatively limited to the main roads. The one on the right, my right, shows the access by car. We also compared 2 journeys to get to Bakewell by public transport and car, and we were assuming that only 1 person was making this journey. The figures are based on fuel costs from January 2023, and it incorporates the £2 fares for bus travel, which weren't actually in place at the time that we were doing the other accessibility study. If anything, the costings are probably biased more to public transport, largely because of that subsidy, the £2 subsidy. If we look at the 2 journeys, one of these was from Greater Manchester, from Denton to Bakewell. By public transport, a mix of bus and rail, It would incorporate 7 different legs and cost about £43. Total travel time would be 5 hours and 11 minutes, and that would allow you 2 hours and 21 minutes at your destination. By car, the cost would range between £5.12 for an EV up to £9.97 for petrol, plus £6 parking when you actually arrive, so maximum of £15.97. Total travel time will be just over 2.5 hours, and that will give you almost 5.5 hours at the destination. Second one is a bit closer, so we're talking from Two Dales to Bakewell. Only one leg, so it will cost you £4 for the bus, and the total travel time will be 48 minutes, allowing you 7 hours in Bakewell. By car, the cost would range between £1.12 to £2.18 for your fuel, and the and the parking charge of £6. So with the bus, you'd only travel for 48 minutes. You've got 7 hours at the destination. Travelling by car, 38 minutes, and 7 hours 22 at the destination. So they're pretty comparable at that. Thanks, Mike. So a little bit of survey we did an online survey. We're trying to find out how people had travelled to the national park on their last journey. Targeted survey done by social media. We launched ahead of the August Bank Holiday weekend and closed just after the school holidays. The survey asked respondents about their most recent visit, so we were asking sort of things about where they set out from, how they had travelled, and we're also trying to find out about people's willingness to use public transport and their reasons for not using it. We had a total of 362 respondents. Thanks, Mike. So these were the popular destinations, not really surprising, and they also, as usual, include the places that are outside the national park boundary but are within the wider Peak districts, Matlock and Buxton. Bakewell and Longshore were the joint most popular destinations. But it should be noted that a number of the people who filled this in went to more than one location as part of their day out. And this would be a difficult proposition by public transport for a lot of places. It certainly has additional cost, complexity and travel time to what can be already complicated journeys. That's why. So where were they coming from? Again, not necessarily surprising. We've got a wide range of starting points, including some that may have just about been in the national park boundary. But Sheffield was the most popular one, but I feel that some of our members particularly tried to promote that survey to some of the residents in Sheffield. So I think we have a slight bias there, should we say, but it's not a million miles away from what our other surveys normally find out. Sheffield always is one of the most popular points of origin. But it kind of ties in with our gut feeling that a lot of our visitors come from within a very close catchment to a national park. That's why. So, as you might expect, the most popular form of travel was by private car, van or motorcycle at 79%. But this is slightly lower than we would normally find when we carry out this kind of survey. We're normally looking at 80 to 85% for car travel. It's also worth noting that survey respondents were slightly more inclined to take the train than the bus, and I suspect that's because of that Sheffield bias. It's also interesting to note that in reasons given for not using public transport, cost wasn't the highest by any means, and this was at a time when people weren't getting the £2 subsidy. Frequency of service, location of bus stop and rail stops were all seen as more significant than cost. Thanks, Mike. So we asked the respondents whether they would be willing to use public transport. 28% said that they would, but 61% weren't willing. We also asked people how often they visited the national park, and more than a third of the respondents visited on a weekly basis, and almost 2/3 visited at least every 2 weeks. Thanks, Mike. So what are the results telling us overall? There are a number of villages and recreation hubs that can't be accessed by scheduled public transport, which, to be fair, we do. Most visits by public transport involve at least 2 changes of either bus or train, and would involve a longer time spent travelling than at the destination. By comparison, the car is quicker and often cheaper, even allowing for £2 fares. And that's particularly the case where you're carrying more than one person. Majority of visits to National Park are currently made by private car, and the majority of those travelling are unwilling to make the switch to public transport. But 78% of visitors travel to the National Park at least once a month, and 60% at least every 2 weeks. If we could get some of these frequent visitors to use public transport or active travel, it would help to reduce some of the negative impacts that we, particularly the National Park Authority, are hearing about from residents and some other visitors. Thanks, Mark. So what did all this lead to? The actual research formed part of a presentation I was asked to give to the Transport Symposium that we hosted in February of 2023. It was seen as quite a big thing for the authority. It was our new chief exec's first major public meeting, I believe. We've got senior members involved with this, and we invited a variety of stakeholders, including those from local authorities, businesses, tourism bodies and the third sector. So most of the things that people were talking about were quieter roads, well-used bus networks and good walking and cycling opportunities. So these are the things that people wanted to see. They want to see better promotion and connectivity with public transport, extending active travel options, and projects like the White Peak Loop were mentioned a number of times. And there was support for some new ideas, or not necessarily new, but recurring ideas, should we say. It's transport hubs, park and ride schemes, things that had happened in the past. Road user charging, I remember my previous manager suggesting this back in 2002. So nothing new under the sun, as they say. Also seasonal car park schemes, car-free schemes. Again, these are things that we've done in the past and could do again. Thanks, Mark. So one of the key things that came out of the symposium from the National Parks perspective was that the post that I'd been asking for in my original report was agreed. So we established the Sustainable Travel Officer post. It's a 3 years fixed term post from November 23 onwards. It's got a £50,000 budget to support the project, and we recruited Matthew into the post in autumn of 2023, which seems a good point to introduce him.
Hi everybody.
I'm Mike, and you. So, next one, please.
Hi, so I'm Matthew Eglin. I'm relatively new to the park, but I was brought up in Glossop, and I now live in Buxton, having spent most of my adult life in Canada. So if the accent's a bit strange or I use the wrong words, that's where it comes from. I was brought into this position based on the management plan, National Park Management Plan. National Park Management Plan has a climate change objective to reduce 25% of our emissions over the next 6 years. And part of that is to produce a sustainable travel framework. And that goes beyond visitors. So it's looking at the holistic view of travel and transport within the park. And one of the first things I did was, and I didn't put it on here because it's a page of dense text, is what is sustainable travel from the park's perspective. And I actually went back to an EU document that, and I'll praise it very quickly. It basically says the transportation system shouldn't harm the earth, shouldn't be polluting in terms of carbon, shouldn't be polluting in terms of air pollution, and it should support sustainable communities, and it should support sustainable access to places. So that encompasses, from my perspective, visitors, and that's a very nebulous term, as you probably realise, residents and commuters, which, having done some research, are actually a surprisingly good chunk of our transport emissions in the park come from people who live outside the park, like me, and actually Tim as well, who commute into the park on a daily basis. The essential piece that's sort of to this is that we want to improve transport as a whole, and public transport is critical to that, because we have an issue in the park. For example, I'm going through all the statistics, and you'll see this eventually in a report, and one of the big issues is that it's a symptom, not a problem itself, is that a huge level of car ownership in the park, which means that the implications of that is that there's no viable public transport for many of the settlements. And that influences access for people wanting to access the park as well. It's a two-way thing. So we want to make sure that we start to look at those issues in some detail and try to come up with a policy mechanism to improve access to the park for residents and for visitors and for commuters. So, actually I've skipped ahead. So we are really looking for an integrated low carbon public transport system, and that's going to involve rail and buses. We need to get great cycling, wheeling and walking connections into the park. So one of the things that I've noticed is that people will drive to Monsell Trail, for example, right up and down the Monsell Trail, active travel, and then get back in the car and go back. And I think I would love for people to leave their house without their car, experience the park, and then come back. And that does two things. If we have that sort of system in place, we're going to reduce our carbon, which is great, management plan achieved, but also it's going to increase our levels of accessibility to car-free users who live in the park and live outside the park. I grew up in Glossop. The Glossop railway line that serves from Piccadilly goes through some of the poorest areas in Manchester. Yet access from Glossop into the park on public transport is very poor. You can't get, except on Sundays, I think on 4 buses now, you can't get to Snake Summit, for example. You can't get out towards New Mills because there's no Sunday buses. Things like that we need to fix. And then we also, in parallel to this, we also need to accept that the private car is going to dominate no matter what we do. So we have to look at reducing emissions from private cars, and that's the government's push, and it's one of the few places we're actually getting some money, is on EV charging infrastructure. So that will be coming into the park as well. And we, as I said before, we need to take account of everybody. So currently I'm gathering data, looking at the emissions profiles for all the different modes of travel, trying to work out where we can influence things, and then there's going to be, that's leading towards the Sustainable Travel Framework, which will hopefully bring together the evidence base and some policy directions that we can then present to you and to the other groups within the park. So I'm open to any questions.
If we do questions at the end, Matthew, there's just a little bit.
Oh, you've got one more? Yeah.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
you? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Sorry, you're right with that slide. Do you want me to go back?
No, on to the next one, please.
On to the next one.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Tim.
That's all right. Right, thank you. Okay, so just wanted to give you a little bit of information on the Active Travel England funding that we've recently received. So as you all know, we've got quite a long-standing record on delivering multi-user routes, including across the 4 authority-owned trails. So in 2015, we published a wider Peak District cycling strategy. We worked with all of our partners. It was kind of built on the stuff that we'd done in the Pedal Peak 2 project. And pretty much as soon as we got it published, the funding dried up, and the way in which funding could be accessed for such schemes changed. So 2017, we've got the DFT Cycle and Walking Investment Strategy published, and it sets out the requirement for local walking and cycling infrastructure plans. 2022, Active England established, and it becomes the body with responsibility for funding new walking and cycling infrastructure. And then earlier this year, Active Travel England invited National Park Authorities to bid for capacity funding, capability funding. And the East English National Park Authority was successful, and we all received £100,000 to develop a local walking and cycling infrastructure plan or equivalent. And that plan must be developed within 12 months. That's right. So what do we want to do? So within that 12-month framework, we aim to produce a high-level national park cycling walking infrastructure plan. It won't have the level of detail, but it will hopefully map out a network for us. We'll be working closely with our constituent and close neighbouring highway authorities, because what we want to do, we want to add value to their walking and cycling infrastructure plans by filling gaps. What we don't want to do is duplicate work and potentially build things that don't go anywhere, shall we say. When we put our bid together, we divide the work into 4 clear areas. Producing the plan, which is the overwhelming thing, but also data and evidence collection, so that we get an idea of how people use the existing networks. Facilitation and consultation, we will need to work with partners, in particular those local authority partners and yourselves. Scheme development, including route auditing. That's right. So this is where you come in, I guess. So what we obviously need to work with our constituent authorities, but we want to get opinions from people from a wider remit. And we see the Peak District Local Access Forum as being a great forum to help us with that. So what we would like you to do is to establish a subgroup that will help us with the development of the National Park Cycle and Walking Infrastructure Plan. But what we'd like to do is also allow that to be widened out to people that aren't represented on the Local Access Forum at the minute, so that we get as many views in as we can. And that's really our ask of you today, in exchange for the presentation, for the information. Next slide, please, Matt. So that's it, really. Just want to thank you for listening, and we'll take any questions, and obviously, we'd be grateful if you'd take our request on board in terms of helping us out.
Great. Thank you very much, Tim and Matthew. That was really interesting, and it's also really nice to see how everything's moved on from when you were last here, and that you're in post now and sort of starting to do that work. And also, even though instinctively you know things are true, it's nice to see them coming through in surveys and things. So, questions, thoughts, comments, Jeff, and then Susan, and then Craig. And then, hang on, I'll try and keep up. Jeff.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. Thanks for that very intriguing and kind of fascinating research. Then the only query I've got is the kind of 26 million, and I remember at one stage we said 22 million, and it was second to Mount Fuji in the world, and then that was discredited and it went down to I think 14 million. And I'm just wondering kind of where the 26 comes from and what the basis for that is.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to explain that. So we have data that's carried out, STEAM data, which is carried out for all the national parks, and that focuses on visits that are 3 hours or more. And I think the last update we had from that was that it was around 13 million visits that lasted 3 hours or more. But we are aware that there's a large number of people who they come in for an hour, they cross the boundary and walk their dog. And our research team had kind of highlighted the fact that they thought that was about an equal number. So that gives you the 26 million overall. That was a figure from pre-COVID. And we believe that, particularly the COVID years when we had that really nice summer, that it was especially busy within the Peak District, more than we'd seen in the past. What we've been seeing over the last year is, I'm not sure if the overall numbers of visitors have been quite as high, but certainly on those days when it's good weather, the odd few days out of the year when it hasn't rained, we're getting a lot of people in particular hotspots. So arriving in big numbers on the bank holiday days and the summer weekends. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I should point out that the STEAM data is a very indirect measurement of visitors. And so we think that the variability, so we look at year to year, we see an increase or a decrease. We think that's really valid. But the exact number of visitors is a derivative. And it's not, I sort of think it in my head, it's 26 million units or 30 million units. It's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship with a visitor. The number of visitors could be much higher or much lower, and we wouldn't know. But it's what it does give us a longitudinal measure where we can look at the variability and we can correlate that with traffic data and emissions data and things like that. So but we shouldn't get too locked into the idea, is it 30 million or is it 30 million and one visitors? It's not that kind of a number.
Thank you.
Yeah, just I imagine amongst all that, for instance, if you're including the half hours or whatever, some people could be visiting 300 times a year or more, couldn't they? So, yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. I can't remember who was next. Was you?
Thank you. Really interesting presentation, and I think it's something we're probably all interested in, active travel. As an occasional bus user and a cyclist, you'll know that I'm very keen on the White Peak. I live at Basel, so we've got good transport hubs. When we've got time, reliability of the buses is a real major issue. So I would welcome the a wider subgroup, but to include those public transport providers in with that group. And can I say also, just a comment, I think the amount of visitors we get and 362 responses is, you know, it's really poor, and it's how you engage with people. But I think, you know, 362, you know, you get that in a tiny village of a Wednesday afternoon. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Craig?
Yeah, no, it was, is that on? Yeah, that was really interesting. First question, could I have a copy of that slide deck?
Is that
Well,
okay?
what we normally do at the end of the week, we normally have all the presentations posted on our website, so you
Oh yeah,
need
that,
to email out.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll put it on the web page, on the local access forum web page,
Yeah.
and then you can access it.
No, the reason I ask, because the research is really good, and you know, National Trust have got some of the hubs, you know, so Dovedale, Longshore. Interestingly, you know, I see Mam Tor, that, you know, Winnets, Odens has been another key sort of recreational hub, do you call it? Yeah. So in the Trust we also have hubs, but we call them something else, and I get them confused. So they're called hubs. So outdoor hubs, so it's the same thing really. So yeah, and some of that research will help inform some of our plans, because we are looking to invest in those places to you know, increase capacity, but we're also you know, as much as I love car parks, because I love the money we get from them, I'm not going to deny that, but we do reinvest that money into the landscape. We mustn't forget that, and a lot of that investment is around nature, but also a huge amount around access as well. But we are particularly interested in public transport, walking and cycling, so I guess I would probably say the same thing if we can try and tie up both if possible. I appreciate you've got this commitment over 12 months to come up with a plan, and that is a short period of time. It flies in a, you know, if it doesn't feel long, does it really? So I'd gladly put forward one of my project managers to help with that. You know, she's actively involved in looking at transport and encouraging people to access our places in a different way rather than just a car. But we're acutely aware a lot of people are still going to access by a car. I don't think we should forget that. You know, that isn't going to change, and hopefully, when, you know, as we move towards electric, then some of the emissions will be reduced that way. But yeah, so really interesting. Thank you for that.
Great. Thank you, Craig. I think I had Alistair next, and then I've got Jez and Martin and Paul.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, thank you for the presentation, because it kind of confirms what you kind of think, but it's good to see figures behind it. From our perspective at Yorkshire Water, it's hard to work on your own with these things, so I'd welcome that subgroup, and I'd happily sit on that to represent ourselves and the forum, obviously. Because we work on, I work on sustainable routes, usually in conjunction with the local authority, so at Barnsley or Sheffield in the main. But it's become, as I'm working on these things and talking to different groups and stakeholders, it becomes quite evident that we all kind of work in our own little silos. So a wider strategy would be really helpful. We've got Langsett, as you know, Tim. So I'm currently working on how we get folk to Langsett from Stocksbridge, for example, and off-road ideally, or quiet roads if we have to. So we're looking at permissive routes initially,
just to get that access and try and encourage that, like you were saying, come out your front door and cycle to the Peak District. Cause
Absolutely.
It's well, probably 20-minute bike ride from Stocksbridge to Langsett, if you're quite fit, I suppose, half an hour. Or a family group, you don't want to take your kids on, certainly not on the A616. So anything that, and the other thing we're working on, we're delivering in the north of the region, so it's not the peak part, but it's relevant. We sponsor a bus service up there with the Dales and Bowland CIC. I don't think there's such CIC exists in this. I've asked this before, and it doesn't appear that even the Travelling Light project doesn't come as far north as we'd like it to. So, but we are sponsoring a bus service that goes to the Washburn Valley and Nidderdale, up in the north of the region. So, whether an injection of sponsorship like that, I can't promise anything because my funding's limited, like a lot of people's. But whether that would help. I'm just throwing the idea out there, really. But, yeah, as you can probably tell, I'm quite enthusiastic about getting folk out of the car because we're doing it all wrong at the moment. I mean, I've come in a car myself today. I'm as guilty as everybody. But, if there's more options, at least there is options. At the moment, the options are quite limited, aren't they? So I'll shut up now.
And interesting, because I'm imagining some of the incentive for you guys is that currently managing cars is just a big headache at the sites that you have.
Yeah, as Langsett is so popular. We've introduced parking charges, not at Langsett yet, but up in the Washburn, and it's not stopping folk. No. The car parks are still overspilling because they're full, not because folk are trying to dodge the charging. So it really is. People it's almost like with a car, we'll pay whatever it needs because I want to stay in my car. But it's not that easy to get out. We went to London recently, and the train option was just not feasible. It was ridiculous. So it's just that.
Yeah.
It's that options, I think, and it'd be great to work with you guys on that. Yeah. Okay.
Jess.
So I'm going to be the heretic of the room, I'm afraid.
Go for it.
So yes, cars. There's a sort of general belief that they are the worst thing in the world. And the reality is cars have given people freedom that they've never had before to access the park. I talked to old Sheffield Ramblers who are very pro-public transport, and even they admit the car has given them a freedom that they just never had to visit not just the honey spots of the Peak District, but the other places. It's already been mentioned that cars are going to be becoming greener at a very quick rate of knots, certainly in historical terms. Fundamentally, they will end up being greener than public transport because you don't have as much infrastructure to go with them. And what I also never hear is how can we improve access for car users? And the reality is we should perhaps be thinking more, and it's in the annual report, it says about improving access for the public. It doesn't say improving access for the public via public transport, just for the public. And I'd make a plea that the focus of a lot of the work should be on managing cars, of course, because there are too many, but don't go down an anti-car route there. And the reality is there's a massive data gap in the data that everybody's working to be honest. And that's understanding the total journey picture and through the Peak District in this case. But you've got commuters have been mentioned. You need to look at people who just go straight through from one side to the other. You need to look at local use of cars, visiting families. You need to look at visitors. I suspect, in terms of the total emissions from the park, visitors will be a tiny proportion of it. Probably the meals that they have in the pubs are bigger than the journeys that they make to get in there. And, if you want to do a holistic approach, you need that big pie chart looking at farming emissions, land use emissions, you name it. And if it comes out that visitor emissions are this tiny little bit, really the park needs to focus on whatever the biggest emissions are. It might be that it's housing and needs for insulation and air source and ground source heat pumps. So that's my plea, to get a really good understanding of the journeys and look at the overall emissions rather than focusing on visitors and cars. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess.
Thanks. If I could just come back. The idea behind this is not being about anti-car. But we are aware that there are locations where the impact of it is higher than we would like. And what we've seen is that kind of massive shift where the provision of the alternatives has become less over time. And whilst the card does give you the ability, if you own one, to be able to get to all sorts of parts within the national park, as Matthew alluded to earlier, there's parts of our very near catchment where people are in severe poverty and don't have the ability to own a car, or if they do, it takes up a large amount of their income each year. So what we'd like to do is provide some of those alternatives where you give people the choice. I drive, and I'm a Munro bagger, and most of the places I go to climb mountains I can't get by public transport, so I appreciate what you're saying. But it is about enabling the choice to be there as much as anything, and certainly in the active travel side of things, that's what we'd really like to be able to do, to provide those connections so that people who use the Monsell Trail, for example, don't have to drive into Bakewell to access it, or to Hassett or to Millersdale, that they can get on their bikes in Matlock and Buxton, and maybe particularly from Manchester actually come in by train, or from Derby come in by train, either with their bikes or hire a bike when they get there, and then just be straight onto the trail. So it is about alternatives, and it's very much not a, we don't want to see cars, because we have to accept that they will be here in some form or another for a long time. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add to that though, I think it's about being positive about managing cars rather than trying to push them back. Where's the plan for car parking? Because it does, as Craig's mentioned, it is actually a way to bring funds into it. You almost think we should be being positive about cars and to basically extracting money from car users as well, whether it's charging points that you can get a margin on for the long term, or car parking charges. Thanks.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah. So.
Yes.
So you're not wrong about the emissions. My draft is not in a pie chart. I'm sorry, it's a bar graph, but it looks very much like you described. I don't think we're going to take it, as Tim said, we're not going to take an anti-car approach at all, because it does provide incredible access. And I will admit that I drive my admittedly electric car all over the Peak District to get to places that I couldn't access in other ways. But one of the best things we can do for car drivers is get those people who are able to use public transport onto public transport and free up some road space. And I think that balance is a virtuous one, because we're helping people get in from Sheffield and Manchester. We're helping people get in from the periphery of the park, and also users within the park by public transport to those sites that we can get good access to. And that's only going to be a small percentage, but it will be all the big ones, hopefully. And that should help with car parking and traffic as well on busy days. So we've got to look at everything holistically, and I am doing that, and I'm getting support to do that, so it's good. So it's not just that.
Thank you. John, and then, John, and then Martin.
One subject that hasn't been talked about is those with disabilities. I have a daughter who can't use her legs at all, so she's in a wheelchair permanently. Can't drive because she can't work the pedals, etc., etc. So public transport is useful to her. If she goes abroad to different countries, it's like Martin and myself were talking earlier. Certain countries, disability isn't a problem. You go to Belfast. If you stood at a bus stop in the centre of Belfast, out comes a ramp, and the first person to get on the bus is the person in a wheelchair. There is a disconnect across the whole world. She flies and everything, but we don't seem to be mentioning them. We talk about walking and cycling. If you can cycle on a track, she can take a wheelchair on a track. And that works. And I think we're missing a trick. There's a lot of people who can't get into the park. And if you look at the number of people that are disabled in the country, it's a very large proportion. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Any comment, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, John. Obviously, at this stage, we're just developing the high level cycling walking network as part of this. But amongst the things that we will certainly be looking at is accessibility, and it's something that Sue is very keen on telling us that we need to look at when we're doing this kind of work. And to be fair, Active Travel England will as well. And they're providing the funding. They will want these routes, whether they're, I'm referring to it as walking and cycling, but it's wheeling as well. It's about providing the access so more people can make these journeys. Yeah, and they may or may not be long journeys, depending on whether you're using it for recreational use or if you're using it for commuting or just to get out and get a bit of exercise. But one of the things that I was kind of really pleased to see when we used to close the Mossel Trail for Bakewell Show to run the park and ride, and I used to be one of the people that used to have to make sure that all worked all right, and so I'd spend the best part of a week on the Mossel Trail, and I used to see an awful lot of people with various mobility issues making use of that trail, whether they were pushing a frame along or they were using wheelchairs, and that used to be really great, the fact that these people had this access and it was level access. And we'd spent an awful lot of time when we were looking at the original Pedal Peak project, myself and other members in the team, as to how we got best access onto the trail at different locations, and seeing it being used in that way was really good. And so of course we will take that on board when we're doing this work. Thanks.
Thank you. Martin.
Tim, Matthew, thanks very much for that. It was a great research, and I'd very much like to support a subgroup and beyond the subgroup as well. In fact, indeed, in preparation of your presentation, I went on a tour of the Netherlands for 3 weeks and actually produced 4 pages of my observations as my dedication to the lab. Very thorough. The Netherlands is a population of 70
Not
million
funded
people.
by the LAF, just so that you're getting any ideas.
Yeah, if we could have a tour, that would be great. Netherlands is a population of 17 million. My observations for 3 weeks, I went with 9 people. We went into Central Netherlands. Everybody is cycling, all shapes and sizes, young and old. I was cycling along, watching parents with 5-year-olds cycling along streets in towns, with cars still passing by. It had a profound effect on me to see that we could have an alternative environment. No helmets to be seen at all in the country. Everyone looking pretty fit. There were cars, so I think cars still are a part of it, but really there's a cycling network. It is superb. And the transport, we went on one train journey from Meppel to Zwolle, arrived there with an integrated safe storage unit if you wish. Your train ticket is linked up to your train ticket, and the double-decker train, blue leather seats, was sublime. It is, I could go on for a couple of minutes. So it is just, that's vision. So yes, I'll be happy to work with you and support you any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I think I had Paul next and then Claire, and I think Craig as well.
Just on a quick one to Martin, I think the Dutch have an advantage topographically over us here. We have a few more challenges than they do.
Can I just come back? They call you will notice it's flat. You get a lot of wind going across, and they call it the Dutch mountains. One of the bits in our leg, we were slightly miscalculated. A very long day, and it involved going across a dike across the sea for 29 kilometres into a headwind. I have to say, I was averaging about 6 kilometres a mile. So, but of course, the answer to that, all our hills, are electric bikes. Majority of the 9 people I were with had electric bikes. And so that is, I think, is the future. I mean, almost everybody will be able to use an electric bike. So I see this as almost as a potential revolution to redo our transport system. And of course with public transport, and of course with cars, because occasionally you need to get to remote spots and things, but the model is there. And the Dutch people tell me that Denmark is even better. I cannot Give it a shot.
Yes.
Thank you. Paul, your microphone's gone off.
Okay, just to respond to Martin again, there's a disparity between being able to get a £90 or £100 push iron out of Halfords and an e-bike. There's a cost prohibition on electric bikes. They are phenomenally expensive for anything decent. So that is an imbalance that has to be addressed if we're going to use e-bikes in the park. However, not my point. 2 points. One, we're talking about getting people to ride their bikes into the park. Something we've been pushing for ever since I didn't have grey hair, is reclassification of some of the off-road routes into the park. We've got bridleways that leave Sheffield that turn into a footpath somewhere halfway across the moor. Does this plan take into consideration looking at routes that could be upgraded to get bikes off the road and onto that, to prevent people, I mean, a lot of mountain bikers I know drive their lovely big cars into the Peak District with their bikes strapped on, then ride the rides and then get back on and then go again. And I'm sure a lot of them would appreciate the challenge of being able to come over the tops.
Okay, so for the first year, the development of this plan will be high level, so it won't look at detailed stuff like that. But we are working with our, we will be working with our constituent highway authorities, and so if there are places where there is an obvious gap, I'm just aware, Mike will tell me that it's quite a long process to get a footpath converted into a bridleway, but for sure, if there are opportunities there, we will try and take advantage of them.
Okay, we've got a big list that we can provide that might fill in that. We've been compiling it for quite a while. And the second thing is, if we're going to encourage people to come in on public transport, especially if we're going to try and get, again, specifically on mountain biking and some cyclists, is the provision to carry bikes has got to be improved on trains and buses. It's absolutely pathetic at the moment, and nobody is going to make that transition while we can only bring 2 bikes in from Sheffield.
Thanks, Paul. Good points. Thank you. Claire?
So my point's quite small and not very erudite compared to everybody else's. Just one point for Tim and Andy, like your data about where people like to go and where the honey spots are is ace. And I wondered if, as you develop it more, you might want to augment it with Strava heat maps. Do you remember the Ramblers presentation last time? They'd been doing a lot of work with Strava, and I'm just a little shout out, I'm developing an orienteering competition for July, 2nd of July, Hollins Clough, and we've used Strava heat maps to figure out actually some of the routes that are quite nice, because some of the area around Hollins Clough is challenging for newbie navigators. So that's one point. Strava heat maps, really useful source of data. And then the other one's just a really little point about managing parking and the difficulties of overspill parking. So I went to Wetton recently, and Wetton car park's tiny, isn't it? It's like 15 spaces or something. And there was just an ad hoc farmer's field with an honesty box. And I didn't know it was there till I got there. There's nothing to tell me when I get to Wetton. Actually, and there was a huge field, there's a couple of hundred cars in it, but maybe about 100. And I guess I don't know if there's any way of identifying and advertising where these kind of ad hoc seasonal car parks are and getting them on the map somewhere.
Thanks, Claire.
As well as the walking and cycling, I do deal with our parking policies in the National Park Authority as well. So we do have a policy to enable permanent visitor car parks to be developed. But what we do tend to do is try and persuade people that if it's just dealing with a seasonal issue, to do pop-up car parks. And they're allowed to do that without planning permission. As long as they don't change anything about the field, they can do it for up to 28 days. So we encourage it, but we don't necessarily know where they are. But I take your point, it would be useful for people to be able to pick up that information. So it's something we can maybe take back and see if we can do a little better with it. Thanks.
Thank you. Craig?
Yeah, something I forgot to mention, National Trust are just about to go into a new 10-year strategy period, and you can imagine there'll be a lot around nature and carbon, but equally there's something around ending unequal access to nature, history. And so I kind of agree with you that cars are going to be used a lot by people, and I don't think that's going to change. I see a lot of our visitors come with a family and they just have a load of stuff. They have bags of kit, everyone has stuff, but but having an opportunity to encourage people to cycle, to walk and use public transport might not be like an emissions thing, it'll help, but it'll be more around people who don't have access to cars being able to come and experience outdoor places, which I think is really valuable. Just one thing, the Strava data, we use a bit of that, which is great, but it obviously, it's information from a certain type of demographic. But there is now, and I don't know if you're using this, and I hadn't heard about this until recently, there's anonymised mobile phone data.
Yeah, we do use it.
You're using that, which is scary, but it's fantastic. And I believe even works where there's no mobile phone signal, because then it just uploads when it gets a signal, where people have been, dwell time, that sort of thing. So it might be a new way of collecting information. Fascinating, really, rather than like the old-fashioned people counter type things. So, but I did want to emphasise, I've been in the Peak District for almost 3 years, and I've looked into the Peak District from West Yorkshire for quite a few more, and there was definitely there was definitely a sense, or my perception was there was an anti-car sort of feeling. I just think we need to get over that and work with it, because we do have these real pinch points in the Peak District where it's just a bit of a shit show, isn't it, really, on weekends and holidays.
Is that the official
It's a term we use,
yeah. Yeah, you can minute that, call it something else. So I think when this has been presented, we really need to be clear. 28 days, is that long enough, really? It does feel as if these places should be promoted where landowners sort of make parking available. But we should be presenting this plan, alongside improvements to car park. And is there stuff we can do on roadsides, which are clearly being used and are now trashed and will probably be trashed forever? Can we formalise some of that? And can we make an income from this as well? And work with partners who are going to reinvest that income into the landscape? So, I'll shut up in a minute, but, hopefully you're aware, I'm passionate about landscapes, I'm passionate about people accessing landscapes and nature and climate change, but I'm really get excited about my cafes and car parks, holiday cottages and all that stuff, because it makes money that can then be used to benefit nature and people. It has to be sustainable, doesn't it, really? So, that's probably all I want to say on the subject. You might be pleased.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Craig. So just the last couple of comments, and then we'll kind of close up, so we can move on to looking at the rights of way. So last couple of comments, and then we'll have a quick chat about the subgroup. Charlotte.
Claire, in response to your point about Wetton, really aware of the pressures in Wetton, because we have quite a bit of ownership around there, and that pop-up car park is operated by one of our tenants. I think that it's a nice bonus if you get there and you learn about it. I think my concern about promoting it is that Wetton is so popular that actually it might just swamp the village. He set that up really to kind of, because the agricultural access around the roads are so narrow that the tractors were getting blocked, and so kind of helped him in that way too. Tim and Andy, you mentioned the data was really interesting about costs. So the one that stuck in mind was the Denton journey, and I know the times were crazy anyway, but the £43 versus the £15 or something. Even if you're, you own a car, but you're very pro trying public transport, that kind of price differential is going to really have a massive impact. So I just was curious about what work could be undertaken to kind of try and drive down some of those costs, and if there's any work, how those kind of benefits need to operate for a decent period of time, like not one summer season, because it takes years to change behaviours. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, thanks for that. As it happens, I was sitting through a meeting a couple of days ago, which unsurprisingly on sustainable travel, and it was pointed out at the meeting that there are one or two tickets that work really well for doing this sort of thing that actually makes those journeys possible. And we have at least 2 within the national park, but the real issue is that they don't talk to each other. The Peak District as pointed to one of the very first slides. We're very complicated in terms of where we are geographically, with several transport authorities, and an unwillingness historically to be able to combine tickets between those 2 places. So, the Denton one, there will almost certainly be some kind of cheap rate ticket that will allow you to travel anywhere in Greater Manchester. There is a similar thing in Derbyshire, but the 2 shall never meet. Whereas if we could actually get, there is the potential as the mayoral combined authorities start to take over within this area, that we can get those conversations going, because the reality is that they will probably end up with franchise bus services operating in all of those, and maybe that makes it easier in terms of those conversations. It's not somewhere we're at the minute, but there will be potential to drive some of that, I think. Certainly in the past there was a South Yorkshire one as well that used to enable people to travel by bus or train into the Hope Valley and get back for quite a cheap fare. So again, looking at some of those might be possible in the future.
Thank you. Did you have a final point, Paul?
I did, just a last one. With this acceptance that the evil 4-wheeled beasts are with us forever, and they're obviously expanding because we're seeing a huge amount more traffic through our village, and also with van lifers and campers and people coming out, there's more vehicles on the road. There needs to be some consideration of, I see Rob hiding in the corner over there, the toll it's going to take on the road infrastructure. We're currently, I live in Bradwell, and we're going to be cut off from the Hope Valley by 3 months of reconstruction of a bridge. Then Mytham Bridge is going to be tackled. That's at Bamford. And these road projects have been hanging on, now getting to the desperate stage where the roads are degrading. We're going to have to consider what the impact of the cars and all this extra transport is going to be on the infrastructure. It's not just about where people park and the number of cars. It's actually can the roads take the traffic.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody. So hopefully you guys found that discussion useful.
It's very helpful,
as
thank
well.
you.
Once again, it's an amazing group of people in the room. I was going to move on to talk about the subgroup. Is that what you were going to say, Charlotte?
Yeah, just quickly, we will be in touch with everyone. I've just been so impressed with the enthusiasm and the thoughtful ideas that have come from this room. So it's definitely something that will move forward. As I will chair the next meeting, I'll be in touch with you, Tim, and then we can just work out. But I think we need to keep this momentum going and get involved as soon as we can. But yeah, just to let you know that that's very much on my radar now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thanks, Charlotte.
I guess at this stage, Craig, at least via a project manager, Alistair and Martin have all said they would definitely like to be involved in a subgroup. I guess just right now, is there anybody else who's saying yes, they definitely want to be involved? Yeah. So I've got Susan, Charlotte, Paul, Jez and Jeff. Nick. Oh, and Nick, sorry. That's great, and we can also have a chat at that. I mean, I know certainly someone from the British Mountaineering Council will probably be keen to be involved from that kind of recreational user side, and possibly also this. I sit on the Stanage Forum as well, and with Stanage being identified as effectively being a public transport desert, we're really keen to look at what we can do there around that. So, yeah. Well, thank you both very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Great. So, next, we've got Rob Greatorex from the... well, actually, Rob, your job has changed, so I'll let you sort of introduce yourself and your role. But we had a subgroup meeting, as we did a year ago, to meet with the Rights of Way maintenance team at Derbyshire County Council to talk about their planned maintenance work on the network for the next year. So Rob's going to talk a bit about that, and then I think Jill is going to quickly feed back from what we discussed at that subgroup and next steps. Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name's Rob Greatorex, for those who don't know me. And when I last presented to you about 12 months ago. I was a team leader for Public Rights of Way within Derbyshire, so my responsibility at that time was to manage a team of rights of way practitioners. On the 13th of May of this year, that all changed, and as the slide shows, I'm now the senior project engineer for highways inspections. So my remit consists of all highway inspections, the new roads and streetworks function within Derbyshire County Council, and public rights of way. So moving forwards, I won't have a day-to-day involvement with public rights of way. I'll just oversee it. I've come here today to basically outline what we hope to deliver as a part of our capital schemes programme for 24-25, and also just to give you a flavour of what we was able to achieve last year. Okay, Mike, thank you. So these are our achievements from last year, and as the slide shows, we improved. It says footway, that's public right of way. It's just how we report this internally. 2.6 miles of public rights of way. We renewed or installed 400 new signposts county-wide, and then we completed a number of minor schemes which total 52. So that's smaller schemes where the cost is between £5,000 and £10,000 on average, sort of thing. And these are the schemes that we actually completed as a part of the programme. So we've got Caston 20, Caston 21, Edale 19, Ulland 16 and 17, Tintwistle 26, Charleswood 52, Hayfield 47, Outseat 7, Swaddling Coat 36, Repton 11, Dethick 27 and 29, Charlesworth 65, South Darley 37, Belper 64, Outseats 42, Brough 16 and Brough 17. So we were quite busy. Okay, thanks, Mike. Towards the end of last year, it became clear that we weren't able to complete the programme that we set ourselves for 23-24, and there was a residue from previous years as well. We had some really challenging times. From October onwards, we were facing adverse weather conditions almost on a weekly basis. We had Storm Babette, we had this storm, we had that storm, which made it really impossible for us to deliver some of the schemes that we'd hoped to deliver. And this was due to site conditions, environmental constraints, and of course that has a knock-on effect with our resources. So rather than sort of overcommit and underdeliver, we've looked at our programme for what was agreed by our cabinet last autumn, and all the residue that we got from previous years, to come up with a programme that we could deliver. That's hoping we don't have these storms every other week. Thanks, Mike. So what we hope to do in 24-25 is improve the surface of 1.8 miles of public rights of way. Again, renew or install 400 signposts and complete 30 minor schemes. The minor schemes will include Holliford Road at Castleton and Outseats Byway Open Tour Traffic 48, which is also known as Long Causeway, because we are aware through discussions with the subgroup that these routes are important to you. So those schemes will be delivered as part of the minor schemes. Thanks, Mike. So these are the schemes that we hope to deliver within the Peak District, within the Peak Laff area. And as the asterisk shows, these are some of these are the schemes, show the schemes that we weren't able to deliver in previous years. So we've got Bamford Byway Open to Traffic 17, Edale Public Right of Way 19.
Is that Jacobs?
Jacob's Ladder. Yeah. Birchover Byway open tour traffic 23, and the continuation of that is South Darley Byway open tour traffic 46, Monash Byway open tour traffic 29, Chinley footpath 44, Holmesfield public bridleway 54, and Eam Byway open tour traffic 31. Thanks, Mike. So we've also got schemes outside the Peak District local access forum area within Derby and Derbyshire, and I thought it was only sort of fair that I produced those, show you those this morning, what we're up to do in the rest of the county. So we've got Holmesfield Restricted Byway 63, Barlow Restricted Byway 70 and Public Footpath 19, Chinley Footpath 1, Claycross Public Footpath 28, Marston Montgomery 30, Ashover Public Bridleway 140 and New Mills Public Bridleway 54. So these are the schemes that we have deleted from the 24-25 programme for the reasons I've explained earlier. It doesn't mean that we won't go back to these in future years, and Jill and myself will be feeding into our capital programme board later this month, I think.
Yes.
By the end of this month.
So 25, 26.
Yeah. So these schemes may well go forward for consideration in 25, 26. Okay. So that's it, Chair, from in terms of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any
Thank
questions
you.
at this stage, and then we'll move on to Jill's summary of our meeting. Nick.
Hi, thanks for that. Unless I misunderstood the slides, it looks like your aim for this year is lower than the aim for last year, despite the weather conditions that you experienced. So can you tell me why that is, please? Or the group?
Yeah, we've probably been over ambitious in previous years. Combine that with the weather conditions that we've experienced and all the constraints that are put upon us on some sites, it means that we have had to relook at our programme and come up with something that's more realistic. And we feel that the list that we've produced for this current year is deliverable. The last thing we want to do as an authority is overpromise and underdeliver. Plus, there's the resources attached to that, because obviously if there's money sat there that we know that's not going to get spent, then we're better offering that back so that can be recycled, within the council.
So last year's works effectively the same as this year, but they were the reason you got more projects completed 23, 24 is there were smaller projects necessarily than what you're aiming for this.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Fine.
Yeah. And it's down to site location, site specifics, so on.
Any other questions, Martin?
Rob, thanks very much for that update. I mean, just on your new role, I mean, I'll just make a comment that I've got more potholes in the road in front of my house than I experienced in 3 weeks of cycling around the Netherlands. Rights of way. I did refer to the cycle network as superb. I have to say, it's great to get back to the UK. I'm going for a walk this afternoon because our rights of way network has awe and wonder. So that is something which we do really, really well. One of the things, again, back to the Netherlands, they have maps which show the cycle network, which are numbered, and with a new improved definitive map numbering system, which is great. I wonder, why don't we have maps showing those definitive map numbers so people can actually see the numbers of the maps as they walk and cycle about? Would that be an idea, sort of an interpretation board? And they could link it then to their OS maps.
Sounds like a good idea, Martin. Sounds like a very good idea. I think I'd probably need to go away and talk to my colleague who's sat outside of me and see if that's something we can think about.
Yeah.
I can't promise anything.
They do have a wayfinding system, don't they? in Holland,
Yeah.
Where, you know, I don't know if it's coloured routes or numbers, because I've never been, but obviously when we all go over on our LAF trip, it'll be good to see, won't it? But yes, certainly something worth thinking about, how we sign things and, you know, how routes are referred to. Absolutely. Same to everyone.
Perhaps a site visit to the Netherlands.
Susan next and then Claire.
Thank you, Rob, for all the extra finger posts. I think, you know, people that are, you know, you're infuriated when you're not sure where you're going, even with a map, so that's most helpful. Thank you. On a purely parochial question, to save me emailing you yet again, the South Darley byway open to all traffic, is that the one from South Darley that goes through to Snitterton? Do you know?
No, it's Clough Lane. So
Clough
it's
Lane.
what goes from Warren Car up to Upper Town at Birchover.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire.
Mine's a question really rather than a comment. How do, out of all the rights of way for which you have responsibility, how do you determine which are subjective to the work you're going to do? Do you have to audit them all personally each year, or is it based on kind of user data or user reports?
Yes, it mainly comes from inquiries, so that, you know, the inquiries that are reported to Derbyshire County Council, also through, you know, yourselves, parish councils, and so on. And then we have a scoring criteria that we use to you know, to prioritise the schemes that go forward.
So we could help by, you know, identifying popular routes that are to prepare and sort of raising them to your attention. Because you can't possibly, with your small team, actually visit the entire network each year or every 5 years or something, can you?
No, we can't. No, so no, eyes and ears on the ground are, you know, a good way forward. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
And we have this kind of ongoing annual now meeting with the team where we sort of we're helping to sort of prioritise, or at least give our feedback into the proposed schemes. And obviously at that point as well, if anything's come through the LAF, we can kind of emphasise that through that. So yeah, if there are particular routes that are of real concern, then yes, raise them. Thank you. Craig and then Austin.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there an opportunity to work, and this may have happened, or does happen, and I'm just a bit ignorant, but is there an opportunity to work with larger landowners? So if you have a chunk of cash and you're worried about capacity to deliver it all, might there be an opportunity for someone like the National Trust to support, you know, with project management or something? So I hope I've made sense there.
Yeah. We could talk about it, have a chat about it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if you've got identified a priority, always,
Yeah.
you know, and it's on National Trust land, and we kind of think, oh yeah, we'd love that to get sorted, and you've got a lump of money to cover the capital, you know, it might be we can bring in a PM to sort the job out, you know. It's just not just with the National Trust, there may be other landowners who are who may be equally interested, like, you know, like Chatsworth or National Trust or whoever.
Yes, it's something we can explore. We do have quite complex procurement regulations at Derbyshire County Council, so obviously, you know, we'd have to meet with those. We also have service level agreements with certain groups and organisations, so that's something we can consider.
There's always ways and means in there, so
yeah.
Interesting. Thank you, Craig. Thank you. Interesting. Austin.
Cheers, Rob. Interested in all the things that are going on across Derbyshire. I'm going to pick on the top and the bottom on there. Bamford Clough at the top. That's an interesting route that's been closed for quite a while. So it's going to be addressed this year and opened?
Yes, we have previously consulted on a experimental traffic regulation order. We just need to basically take the consultation responses that we had from that back to our cabinet member, you know, to basically guide us on the way forward on that. I would like to hope we could conclude that this year, because as you say, it has been closed for a number of years, and we really do need to move that on. In terms of being byway open to all traffic 31, Was that the one you was?
Yeah, the last one.
The last one. That washed out either end of last year or early part of this year. So we've had to temporarily close that for safety reasons. And that's why we've got that on the list, because we do need to attend to that to get it back open again.
So EM31, that's closed to all users at the moment?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Why would it be closed to, I'm just going to some going on in my head, why is it closed to all users? Because I walked up there fairly recently and I would say it was still walkable. And it's not just, I see this in not just in Derbyshire but elsewhere, that routes do get closed, particularly when they're open to other means of traffic. But people could still perhaps walk them or cycle them. I look at the Lake District and think if routes in the Lake District were closed because they were that state of repair, you'd probably close in a lot of the Lake District. Whereas I think, something like Eam at the moment is perfectly walkable and pretty safely walkable. So could like a TRO, could you say it's still open to walkers but not to vehicles?
Yes, we can prohibit certain types of usage. I understand that it is heavily scoured and there's some very deep scouring on that, and that's the reason why we've closed it to all users. I mean, I'm happy to go back and review that and get back to you on that, but as it stands today, it is closed.
Right, yeah. That's interesting. I think it's walkable. That's just my opinion. Signposts, great. I'd like to see those cropping up all over the place. I noticed somewhere, I think it was near Winster, and on there it sort of relates to the notes of your recent meeting. It talks about certain signposts being removed, and on this sign near Winster there was a sign, another little sticker on it saying, don't remove this, you'll be subject to being hung, drawn, quartered or some kind of fine. There's something like that. Is this a real problem? I just can't understand why people would remove signposts, but perhaps I'm not of the right mind.
Yeah, since we moved from the traditional timber signpost, the number of missing signposts, damaged signposts has reduced, but we still are receiving reports that signs have been damaged by hedge flailers, or they go missing altogether. So it is still a problem for us, but it's at a lot lower scale than it was.
It's not people being malevolent, it's accidents, or there is some malevolence within that?
There is some, yes. Yeah.
Right.
Still can't. You used to have little signs, didn't we, say, well, still do, don't we, it's a criminal offence.
Yeah, I saw one of those signs. I didn't want to get near the signpost then. Fingerprints will be on it.
Jill, do you want to give us a quick update from the subgroup?
Yes, okay, I will do, thank you. That probably leads us quite nicely onto that. So the subgroup, which was originally looking at all the 23 red routes, if you remember, like Long Causeway, and before all these routes had any work done. So it's morphed into keeping an eye on those routes that the LAF was interested in. And as some of those get sorted out, that's great. And sort of moving on to other routes that eyes on the ground spot, weather issues and that sort of thing. So the whole idea of that is just to give that information from rights of way to say what they've done and what's coming up, and to get the last comments on that. So, sort of comments on what we've done, has it worked well? But equally moving forward, and we've had quite a few site visits to go out there because the group does represent all the different users on there. We've got Charlotte the horse riders, Paul cycling, Martin on the walking side, etc. To just give some feedback, because obviously, a lot of this work's taking place in sensitive landscapes, and you've also got those needs of different users as well. So it's just useful to just keep that going. So we seem to have this as an annual meeting now, taking place roughly in May time, and I've just done some minutes there just to record what was said for everybody else's benefit, and also when we meet again, that we take the conversation forward. So they're there for you if you haven't read them already. Read them at your leisure, and we'll look forward to the next one in a year's time, roughly.
Thank you, Jill. And as I said, I mean that's an open subgroup meeting, so anyone could come to it. Equally, and it's on Teams, unless we choose to do a site visit. If anyone's got any key routes or comments they want to feed into that, we always let you know when the meeting is, so everyone can always sort of feed into that. And hopefully, Rob, you guys find it useful in terms of getting that sense of priorities, and we also comment on whether a scheme's happening. So, for example, I think we've talked about whether Charlotte has talked about sort of pitching of routes and whether they should be pitched, or and particularly from a horse riding perspective, sort of what they would like the surface to be or what the approach should be. So we can give a whole load of comments on which routes and how. And we really value that because Derbyshire obviously makes up most of what we're looking at in terms of the Peak District. We don't get to look at that for some of the other authorities, but if any of them are watching the meeting, we would love the opportunity to do so. Thank you, Rob. Martin.
Quick one, just on the report, Jill. Item 5, it says Derbyshire's right-of-way network's very good. I think I actually referred just to Derbyshire District, so probably what I'm really qualified to remit. But I would also, that was then, with all the amount of rain and the overgrowth and undergrowth, I think the path's probably going to get pretty much harder to do. My understanding is you are allowed to walk with a pair of secateurs, and you can clip back the amount of vegetation to allow you to for sufficient access. You're not meant to go out armed with to go and remove things, and certainly not things. But you can certainly carry secateurs. So if you're going over a stile and it's a bit overgrown, you can clip back enough to get back. To again make sure you leave them somewhere to the side and safe. But that will certainly help. I think right, it's a way we'll do it, Rob.
Just to say that guidance given at the last meeting does not constitute legal advice. But thank you for that, Martin. That's Rob and then Jez.
We started our annual clearance programme, Martin, at the end of well, it was the middle of May, and we've just about completed the first cut county-wide. So we've got 700 sites that we treat as part of the programme. Most paths get cut twice, so spring, late summer, and as I say, we are just about at the end of the first cut. I think there's just High Peak to complete, but that's just for surface vegetation.
Thank you, Jez.
Yeah, two things. I noticed in the report surface being washed away has come up again, and I think we talked about it a couple of years ago now, and I saw the projects included quite a lot that said drainage next to them. Whatever you do on drainage, do more than you think is necessary, because it's all the time being washed away, you know, and you've got these hollowed out paths that just are big channels, and if you don't address the fact that it's hollowed out, you're just throwing good money after bad. So please look at that really, really hard. And the second thing was just what Martin said about what you're allowed to do, and it goes back to some stupid precedents set with a donkey being run over on a track and a boat running into a pier and things like that, and nobody's ever challenged it ever since, and that's become the mantra. There are a lot of landowners who would be quite happy if people did take matters into their own hands, but there's no mechanism to make that happen at all, and finding out who the landowner is for, say, Ramblers maintenance teams is really, really hard work. You guys do have almost all the landowners, you know who they are for public rights of way. And this goes back a long time as an issue, but there's got to be a way to connect up volunteers with landowners more easily than's happened, so that people don't have to worry about going out with the loppers, which is, yes, some people might do, shall we say, unofficially, but it should be so simple, and it's made into such a mess because of these precedents that go back 100 odd years.
Yeah, thank you, Jez. Martin.
Quick follow-up to Jez's point on the kind of access and landowners. Guy Shrubsole, who came and spoke to us a couple of years ago, Nick Hayes, his book on Who Owns England, one of the things is the land registry. If we could reform that so it's completely open and transparent, and so you can find out who the landowner is straight away, would easily improve that. My understanding is that if you go into France and go into the Mary's office and ask who owns that field, he pulls a file down and tells you straight away. Why we don't know, you can find out where we all live
Thank you, Martin. And I guess I would just reinforce your point around drainage, Jez, and and also looking more wide, as we've said before, looking more widely across the landscape to see how we can hold landowners, where we've got landowners that are working for those kinds of aims, actually trying to hold the water back in the landscape so it's not scouring out these routes. But obviously, I think Babette was a kind of once in a 100 years, but it seems to be happening every year at the moment. But a particular situation of but thank you for that. If there's is there any more on that, or I'll move on to Jill and her ROIP report.
Thank you, Chair.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. That was good. Right, I've sent my report round to everyone. I'm just watching the clock a little bit, so I won't dwell on things too much. Probably more for you to ask questions rather than me regurgitate what's in my report. So I think we've covered aim 1 really. We've had quite a good chat about that. Under aim 2, I've started to get a bit more detail from legal as to which orders are going through the various stages at the moment, modification orders to upgrade or add routes to the definitive map. So there's some detail in there, which I'm hoping to be able to provide at each meeting. Under aim 3, we've got the usual projects, so if everybody wants to ask anything, we've got Pennine Bridleway in there, the White Peak Loop, the Derwent Valley Cycleway that we've just finished a feasibility study on, and then there's the work on the old road between Buxton and Whaley Bridge, which should actually be completed by the end of June. And we've got several members that have had an input to that. Austin, you came out, didn't you, to have a look at that. Charlotte, I think you were away then, so Christine came along to talk about it from the horse rider's point of view. So hopefully we'll end up with something that's good there. I mean, that route was really difficult even to walk. So, it was quite hard to know what to do with it, wasn't it? So we've ended up tarmacking with a grassy strip. We'll have to see how that goes, won't we? But yeah, so that should be finished by June. It's underway at the moment. And I think the route's closed, isn't it, Rob?
Yes, the route is closed,
yeah. So I've thrown a random one in. Of course, Chesterfield isn't in the Peak District Laughs area, but as part of that active travel route across Chesterfield, we've now completed a cycle superhighway down the A619. So if you're ever down there, you can have a look. If you don't want to use your car and travel out, you can look at the video that the County Council's produced on people using that route and sort of how to use it safely. Might be worth mentioning active travel master plans because they're very relevant, following on from Tim and Matthew's presentation. So we've got consultation underway at the moment, looking at 3 of the market towns, Glossop being one of them, which obviously is in this Laughs area. That's open until the 24th of June. So, please do go on there if you're interested. It's quite short notice, but if the LAF would like to do a response to that, we could try and pull something together. I know the DADLAF are looking at Belper and Ilkeston. But then, maybe more interestingly, we've got one coming up for the Hope Valley. So rather than just concentrating on a market town, that will be a wider area, so it will bring in Bradwell, etc. And where you are, Paul, so you're probably interested in that one. So that's coming up next for those. And the idea is that these are sort of looking at what currently stops people doing more walking and cycling within the towns. What would encourage them to do more? What sort of interventions can we put in? How can we improve routes? That sort of thing. And it's all part of that hierarchy. We've got our strategic, and I hate the term sometimes, cycle network, because it just makes it sound like it's not inclusive, but it is. It's walking, it's wheeling, it's cycling, and it's horse riding wherever possible. And then we've got the local connections, and then we drop down into the towns, which, there might not be as much horse riding there, but there are, people are still trying to navigate through towns on horseback. So we need to think of that at every level, really, and every different users. And I always harp on about this, don't I? But while we're investing these big sums of money, let's provide routes that are wide enough and suitable enough for everybody, rather than trying to focus too much on, just cycling, which is all important. Maybe something that will be interesting for next time, if we've got the health agenda coming up, is this. Well, there's the local nature recovery strategy, but more interestingly, it was the Move More and the Nature Connection Plan, which is a recent initiative by the County Council. So if you want me to, I can find out more, see if anybody can come along and talk about that. from the council. That's quite interesting. So it's giving people a way of finding where they can go. You know, it might just be a local park, it might be out into the Peak District to a stunning view, but just connecting people more, you know, leading on from what Craig was saying. You know, it's so important, isn't it, connecting up with nature and to help your health and well-being. And then a little bit on the final page about what we are doing working with volunteers. It is a difficult area because you need that supervision, you need to get all the, you know, landowner agreements, you need your health and safety. But we do have a service level agreement with Groundwork, and they're delivering 337 days last year, working with groups of volunteers all over the county. So that's on public rights of way, it's on our trails, and also on our countryside sites. So it is very valuable. I don't know where we move on from there. Countryside were talking about getting back. I don't know if you remember Steve Cresswell, who came along. He was our volunteer coordinator based in my team. Whether we can get that sort of post back to help groups, you know, become, so they can get on and do work on their own, you know, rather than having to be supervised, but to get all the training in place, get all the information in place. It would be nice to see that back, but resources are very tight, aren't they, at the moment? So, you know, we'll have to see where we go with that. So, right, thank you. That's,
Thank you, Jill. Any
all
questions for Jill on any of that, or any comments?
Jill knows I speak to her quite often about the White Peak Loop. It's something I'm very interested in. When you're talking about small initiative, obviously not too expensive, could I make a plea for sort of infrastructure for locking bikes up in places? Because sometimes you go to places and there's nowhere safe to sort of lock your bike. And I'm very interested in the Derwent cycleway, the improvements in that.
yeah, I'll keep reporting back on that as it goes. It could be bite-sized chunks. It is 68 kilometres, so we won't be doing it all in one go.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Sue, we're on to you. Thank you. Susan's microphone. Your microphone is still on. Brilliant, thank you. Sorry.
Morning, everyone. Just morning. The item I'm presenting today is an update on the Access for All funding. So this is a 3-year programme of funding. We received funding in year 1, and I came and spoke to both the March 2023 forum and again in June to say this is what we did with year 1 funding. We didn't receive any funding in year 2, so 3-year programme of funding. We're funding in years 1 and 3. We're in year 3 now, and we expect funding fairly shortly. The funding that we've got in year 3 is just over 155,000, and we've been looking to see what we can spend the money on. Taking forward the three main areas that we've been looking at, so more miles, more places and more mobility throughout the national park. And what we have looked at in year 3, which is a big chunk of the funding, is providing a further changing place at Parsley Hayes Cycle Hire. So this is on the High Peak Trail, joins in with the Tissington Trail. In year 1 we placed more trampers at the cycle hire, so we now have the Peak District trampers available, and the changing place there will enable some people who couldn't visit the park to be able to visit this part of the park. And to stay longer within the national park for those who need these facilities. A changing place, as some of you might know, gives a space for changing, but also has a hoist as well, which is needed by some. We also have a changing place which has just gone in at Millersdale. And what we'll perhaps do at some later stage when the launch is planned, I will copy in members to see who would be interested in having a look at that. The design is brilliant. It's been made like a railway carriage. It just fits in perfectly with the whole area, and the same as planned for Parsley Hay. So that's going to take a big chunk of the funding, but what we've also been looking at is identifying some other key things. So one of the things we know that the route in the Goit, the Miles Without Styles route, is a very popular one. And at the moment, only part of the route is surfaced. The other part of the route can certainly be walked. It follows a former rail trail, and those with more rugged equipment to cope with any terrain can certainly carry on to the end of the route. But in terms of its promotion as Miles Without Styles, where we talk about access being available for everyone, we've only been able to identify part of the route. And what we'll be doing with this money is extending the length, doubling the length of the route. So if you're enjoying the route, there's no need to stop. If you're enjoying the route and you want to go further, you will be able to go further. And it's such a fantastic route because it elevates you above the mall, and you really feel like you're floating. There is also a section just down the road in Bakewell where we're looking to try and provide a better link between the Monsell Trail and Coombs Road. And I have suggested that if members would like to join us, we can take a look down there just after the meeting and after lunch. What we're looking at there is putting some improved surfacing and handrails. Now, at this current time, we wouldn't be able to create a route of a gradient that would be suitable for use by everyone. But with the choice of surfacing, we think it will make it more accessible by more people. So we'll link in with the Access for All, and also links in as well with some of the work that we're taking forward with the National Park cycling and walking infrastructure plan as well, which again is looking about more opportunities, and again access for all, inclusive access. We've also talked about resurfacing and widening the High Peak Trail at Herdlow, and again this links in with the changing place at Parsley Hay. So coming out of Parsley Hay, head off both directions and be able to go for further. And this again is something that's been fed back by a number of people that they're wanting longer routes. So not every. So what we do, we make routes as interesting as we can. We highlight which are the best parts of routes, but then there's always the longer sections to look at, and this is what we'll be doing at the Herdlow end of the route. And Miles Without Styles routes videos, which the Local Access Forum have fed back on at a previous meeting, and we'll look to carry forward with those. And again, in discussions with people, there's a lot of people that just want to see what the route is like before they head out there. They need that confidence. And various other things such as more equipment and improving the resting places along the High Peak Tissington Trails, and the signage so people can find out where they are, how much further to go to the next location. So signage on the ground on the routes, but also more information on our web pages as well. We will continue to feed back to the Local Access Forum on our progress with these, but I just wanted to highlight at this stage and for any comments from members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. It's really good to know that there's so much going on, and that you've got that funding. Any comments or questions from anyone? Martin.
Sue, thanks very much. Great report, and great. The more miles, the hard infrastructure. John was talking. We were talking about Ramblers have got an outdoors unlocked campaign. So anything that we extend the miles for without sales route is great. The more places is that sort of the soft infrastructure, and again, great to have a changing place and seating. Again, just go back to the Netherlands. Every time I recycled, regular places where there's a bench or a table, slightly landscaped little area, a bin. They have funnel bins that you can throw in your things. So I think that's really essential. Interestingly, in both countries, no shelters. It rains like anything. If you're walking and cycling, you know, that is something that really, really will benefit. And I think for most of us, we will probably all get out at all weathers and all times, but not everybody, they get put off. And I think certainly sort of just thinking how we can break down the barriers and get more people out to encourage them. There's things like that, the soft infrastructure would help.
Yeah.
Yeah, in year one, we made a ramp to one of the weigh-bridges along Tissington Trail, and we're going to be looking at the other shelters, the other weigh-bridges along the trails, not just making them accessible in terms of the ramps, but making them great places to sit out the weather, because we do get a lot of weather in these areas. So it will include more interpretation. It will include seating as well.
That's great, Sue. Thank you. Thanks for that. And I saw, Craig, that you guys have made progress with Ilam with your FIPL. Is that right? Has that started going in now? That would be amazing, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So we received a grant for accessible footpaths at Island Park, which is really important. So yeah, I remember when I started this job, it's really quite interesting. Don't get us wrong, I love Island Park. It's beautiful, you know, but actually, if you're not very mobile, have a disability, it's a bit of a damn squid, if you want my honesty, you know. Accessible toilet, which is great, change in place, which is fantastic. But you can't get in the bloody cafe and you couldn't go for a wander, you know, you couldn't explore the landscape. But thanks to, forgive me frankness, but I think it's good to point these things out. But thanks to the resources through FIPL, we've been able to install a footpath phase 1. So I took my in-laws, they stayed with us for a week. It was all right till about Wednesday. Needless to say, I made many excuses to take the dog out for a long walk. But actually, on a serious note, I took my father-in-law and mother-in-law to Ilam, and it was transformational for my father-in-law, because almost 3 years ago we arrived at Ilam, and we couldn't go anywhere, you know, so we couldn't get in the cafe, you know, so it wasn't dog-friendly either, so we went to Wetton Hall, which does fabulous lunch if you've never been there. But now, 3 years later, my father-in-law who has like a scooter-type tramper thing, he was able to explore, go down to the River Manifold, he was able to get on the bridge and look up the river. So it was just a really wonderful experience, and working with the Peak Park Authority, we've secured another chunk of money to do phase 2 of the footpaths as well. So for me, accessibility is just fundamental to everything we do. You know, whether it's history or nature, if people can't access it and experience it, understand it, or just appreciate it, and then what's the point, really? So, and then just very briefly, we are going to go for a Heritage Lottery Fund as well. We're going to put an expression of interest in this year for Ilam and Dovedale, which is all around accessibility. It's all around engaging with different audiences, and this is why I'm particularly interested in the transport topic earlier on, because we really want to encourage people to visit those places who can't access them, but we also want to encourage people to visit those places without using a car, even though I accept a lot will still do that. So in terms of accessibility, hopefully over the next sort of 5 years, we'll be investing many millions in those places. So Touchwood will get that. And we're not sure if we're going for the integrated landscape heritage one or the standard heritage lottery. I think that's because we just don't know a lot about the integrated one yet. The detail hasn't been released. So, in particular interested, now you've given us the mic, I'm particularly...
Charlotte and Claire, write that down.
I'm particularly interested in working with many people in this room around Mam Tor, around Winnets, around Orden, that area,
Yeah.
you know, the boundaries aren't set around accessibility, you know, around transport. I want to make the car park bigger, and how can, as a landowner, how can we support with some of the traffic issues there? You know, can we take on some roadside stuff and formalise it, get people parking safely, prevent them from parking where they shouldn't? So, you know, just grasp the nettle and see if we can do something there, you know, alongside encouraging public transport, and hopefully it'll significantly reduce the pressures. It's never going to resolve it, I don't think. So, yeah, and that is around accessibility, around spreading people out a bit more than just going up and down a hill. And we reckon there's almost 1 million people walk up and down Mam Tor every year, which is phenomenal, isn't it, really? And the footpaths are heavily degraded, and the heritage, the archaeological interest is being damaged. So we don't want to stop people from coming. We just want to improve the access so people enjoy it better. Yeah. Thanks for that.
No, thanks, Craig. And actually, if you're looking at roadside parking, we're looking at that at Stanage as well. Similar issue in that there's a lot of areas where there's roadside parking that's informal, but if we could formalise it, we could actually reduce the damage quite a lot. So it'd be quite interesting if you're successful on that, if we can do something there.
Yeah, it's obviously going to work. It's obviously going to be a collaboration with the Big Park Authority, with highways, but I've got access to commercial loans, so I can, you know, borrow money, invest in, you know, facilities. Obviously, there needs to be a return, but the return then gets reinvested back into the landscape. So it's a win-win for everyone, really. So at least I think it is. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nick?
Thanks, Sue. Very interesting to hear the video route descriptions that you've got there. It's something that if we're riding somewhere new, we tend to take the bikes out first and check it out before we go and take the horses somewhere. I think they're worth, hopefully they're really successful for you. I think they're worth encouraging in other scenarios for people to see what they're like. Problem is it's keeping them up to date, I guess, so they can age rapidly, but it's really useful to be able to check out where you're going and what you're going to encounter before you get there.
Yeah, that's really good. I find it interesting with access stuff, often something you do for people who need more support on access actually benefits a lot more people than just those audiences.
Yeah, it's something that we have looked at and discussed with DEFRA and others when we were looking at the farming in protected landscape schemes. So new permissive paths. How do we tell people about the permissive paths? So again, it's something that can link in with that as well. At this stage, we're focusing on the access for all routes because there will be because that's a section of people that maybe just need slightly more confidence to see if the surfacing's suitable, what the gates might be like. But a lot of the things that we're looking at with that, as you're saying, how do we update? How do we edit the maps? How do we provide the information? So some of the things we've been looking at is providing some text underneath the videos, but also as well having it in chapters so people can move forward to a particular section. So yes, I think anything that we do on developing these route videos and having them in-house can also be applied elsewhere.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions for Sue? Thank you. Thanks for that, Sue. And you are also next on the agenda. So you'll remember, well, you can introduce it, Sue.
Okay, thank you. So this is about the review of long-term directions. So these come around every 5 years. We're dealing with the first 3 to be reviewed this year. And the long-term directions relate to restrictions on public access to areas of access land. That's land designated under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act. The 3 sites that we've been dealing with, so there was a consultation back in February to the forum for Deer Hill, Diggle, Rifle Range and West Nab in Bradfield. So the first two are rifle ranges. Well, they're all involving shooting, basically. Their scale varies. So Deer Hill and Diggle are considerably larger than West Nab in Bradfield. We had quite a discussion in the February meeting as to the fall of shot zones and to the level of use at the ranges. And thank you for that, because I was able to take that forward. That's Jez in particular. So I was able to take that forward and discuss those at the meetings. But also to look at what happened when people did access the range, so how they kept people safe, including with the direction, what other measures they took, and also a discussion about the type of shooting taking place, as well as the level of use. The conclusions from that is that proceed with the two directions at Deer Hill and Diggle on the previous basis. That's not to rule out something in the longer term, but what I certainly consider at this time. Climbing has been something that we've been able to allow at Deer Hill, because the nature of use is a more static use than walking. Certainly as well, when we looked at Deer Hill in terms of the type of shooting taking place, it was demonstrated to me out on site about that the shooting is a very dynamic, so it's not from a static position, it's dynamic shooting with high velocity guns, and there is potential, occasional or very, very limited, but there is potential for shot to stray in this area, and as we flagged up, it's an insurance requirement. And a safety requirement at these sites. I've certainly flagged up that there is interest and continued interest in access, and what we will pick up as well is looking at access around the site as well as access through the site. So there have been some subsequent discussions about that as well, to see whether we can widen that scope of access around the site. Diggle as well, no further revisions to the fall of shot zones, and the level of use is pretty much as it was before. Again, what we can have a look at Diggle is improving the access around the perimeter of the site, but little scope for additional access through the site. Each meeting has involves several hours of investigations and reviewing it all afresh. So it's not the reviews are rigorous. And not just a simple basis of this is what was this is what was considered previously. They've been very much that if an application was made today, would they be considered to be on the same basis? What's changed? Is it still necessary for the purpose for which they were originally applied for? And what about the extent and its nature? And because of that, at West Nab Bradfield, I have decided that, and included a consultation, that a variation is in order. That variation is an improvement on the existing situation, and those of you that have been on the forum for quite a while might well recall previous member of the Local Access Forum talking about access being made on the made-up route that currently exists, the track through the site, and this is what we've proposed, or this is what I'm proposing within the consultation. what I've also discussed with the landowner is providing an access point, a wider access point, which will accommodate wheelchair access along this track as well. So it's a better linear access route. The linear access route is at all times, 365 days a year, even when shooting takes place, because the shooting is away from this access track, and it's easy to see people on this access track. I've also identified that flags are going to be possible here, and this is why I've mentioned the size of the site, because it is very easy to see the flags wherever you are on that site, and it is also very easy to see people entering that site from either end and being in the site when shooting takes place, and that's somewhat different to the other sites. So I have attached a consultation in Appendix 2 of the report, and I'd be pleased to receive any discussion and comments at the meeting. Thank you.
Any thoughts, comments? Jez?
Only just to say thank you for carrying on pursuing it. Well done. Thank you. We'll keep on nagging them, and if things change, then yeah, thank you.
So if I've understood correctly, what we've got is is it a new access route or an improved access route?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have explained. I don't have a slide to show, but the previous consultation for the review identified that there's a linear access route along the southern edge of the site. This was gained by a step over stile at this end, and it went through an area of quite dense bilberry, which was cleared back from time to time. This new one proposes a linear access route which follows the track through the middle of the site. This linear access route through the site joins in with an adjacent area of access land, so it provides a link to that area of access land. So the exclusion, when shooting is taking place, when red flags are flying, is across the hatched area in Appendix 2. When there's no red flags flying and shooting taking place, then access may go elsewhere on the site, but in practice I think most people would keep to the track through the site because it's the best route. So I'm going to be looking at some additional way marking to follow that route as well.
That's it. Yeah, that's great, Sue. Thank you. And I mean, it sounds to me like the response from the LAF is going to be to support what's been done. But yeah, I'm doing lots of nodding. Great. Yeah. So we can put that together. Thank you. Austin.
Can I ask one question? It's my ignorance, really. These restrictions, I suppose, about safety to human beings, really. There are other restrictions relating to restricting dogs on access land. Does this forum ever review those? I'm just aware that that's something that's not done, or.
Okay. This is. Yeah. These long-term directions, the ones we've just been discussing, the first, they're on grounds of land management and public safety. So they also consider how the land is being used, and you have regard to the burden in relation to that. We have one further long-term we have two further long-term directions to review. One which we'll be commencing a review on relates to a direction at Hollins Hill, near Hollinsclough. That is a dog restriction between May and October annually, but also provides for a linear access, a concession route to provide access to those areas. For those without dogs, during those months and for everyone outside that period. Other restrictions that you mention in relation to dog restrictions, there's no discretion for us, for access authorities or relevant authorities, the National Parks and Natural England, to reassess those. But they are they run for 5-year periods at a time.
Thank you. Thanks, Austin. Thank you. Any other questions for Sue? Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. Mike?
Okay, a very quick one. Every year we produce an annual report. I've tabled a early draft. The intention this year is to produce a bit of a slimmed down version, and we're going to produce it as a TRF. PDF. TRF? Oh, God. And then distribute it to the necessary bodies. If anybody would like to contribute to the local access forum annual report, I'd be very appreciative to see your contributions. Particularly with regard to the themes for next year, really. And you know, we sort of make this up as we go along a little bit, and it'd be quite nice to have some input from other members to help us out, really, to decide how you want the forum to go forward, really. So have a look through the draft of the annual report, think about where we might go next year, and your thoughts on the themes for the forthcoming meetings would be very, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any members' reports under section 11, unless anyone has anything they want to feed in. Oh, Martin, is it about the Netherlands again? Sorry. I couldn't resist it.
No, actually, it was just to follow up the Jill's reference to the local nature recovery strategy, and I went to a second meeting. I was invited along with Miranda's hat on. And the second meeting on the 19th of April at Shipley Country Park, a reduced number this time. I think we must have been a select number, so about sort of 20, 25 of us. And just to remind everyone, they've got a year to produce this report, to create a consultation to go out to the general public. So they're using us really as a sounding board. We had a really active morning of lots of activities and really just getting us to really just, I think they was just trying to tease out what we knew about Derbyshire, what were our favourite bits, and that was going to feed back into the thing. So it was a very enjoyable morning, and hopefully there'll be another follow-up session. So that's that.
Fantastic, thank you. Charlotte, I think I've got the Trails Strategic Plan and the National Park Management Plan, I think.
Yeah, so the Trails Management Plan, you did have circulated the update on the works that have been completed. So in addition to the work that is detailed in the action plan, the Trails have also been responding to structures survey work, work on the tunnels and bridges, completed in line with the prioritisation for the 6 yearly inspections, regular inspection regime in place, and regular vegetation clearance around the structures is now as part of the annual maintenance plan. The cutting walls have got an ongoing project to develop a suitable solution to the waste above the cuttings, and the annual risk assessments have been completed. A number of walls are to be or have been relocated from the edge of the cuttings and with the agreement of the adjacent landowners. And the car park management, some car parks lined to increase capacity at appropriate car parks and introducing charging to a number of car parks. And the annual maintenance programme is continuing to deliver in line with the Trails Management Plan to just keep them in good repair. So that work is ongoing. I'm just wondering, Mike, is it possible to give a link to the management, both the management plan and Trails Management and the National Park Management Plan, just so people, if they want to delve a bit deeper into these things, they can. Is that?
We'll put it in the minutes.
Yeah,
Yep.
brilliant, thank you. And then the other, so we asked for an update on the National Park Management Plan. I hope everybody's aware that this is the overarching document that guides the National Park forward. When it is reviewed on, I think it's 5 years, is it, Mike, that it's reviewed? And then a new plan comes out. It's a 10-year plan, isn't it? But on a 5-year, I think. Anyway. So the Local Access Forum is part of the review and coming up with the new plan. So we've asked for an update. So the plan has been created, and then there's working with partners and different groups within these partnerships to actually deliver the National Park Management Plan. So at the moment, they're at the stage where the partnership meetings and progress of communications for the delivery period of the plan works on 3 groups. So the first group is the partnership group, and this group oversees and reviews delivery of the National Park Management Plan with senior representatives acting as champions and ambassadors for the National Park. This group is comprised of senior representatives from lead partner organisations such as local authorities and others with significant statutory responsibilities such as Natural England and the water companies and major landowners, and this group meets once a year. The delivery group, this group ensures that the National Park Management Plan is delivered and remains relevant to partners, and is comprised of representatives from delivery partner organisations identified in the National Park Management Plan delivery plan, as well as many from the partnership group. This group also includes other leading on specific actions within the National Park Management Plan, and that group will meet 4 times a year. Then there is the wider stakeholder forum, and the forum is open to all partners and stakeholder organisations with an interest or wider role in delivery of the National Park Management Plan objectives and actions. The forum will take place once a year, and the Local Access Forum is part of this wider stakeholder forum for the National Park Management Plan. The LAF and many of the wider stakeholders are an important part of the partnership working for the authority, and also have direct relevant officer contacts within the authority, and they're kept up to date on relevant National Park Management Plans actions through that route. The forum will give stakeholders the opportunity to positively influence the delivery of the National Park Management Plan and National Park Vision, explore issues or conflicts associated with the National Park Management Plan actions, and engage in wider discussions and thought through leadership association with the National Park. And we could exchange data and project reports relevant to the National Park. It's a large group, however, and there will be some structure to the way it operates. Where the partner group of the delivery group focuses on particular issues, then they will ask stakeholders to contribute to discussions at that level. The hierarchy is set to some extent by the changing legislative environment and the level of partner engagement in the delivery actions across the plan. And they have around 80 partners which need to be practical services for the LAF separate through the work of the teams. This is the LAF's other communication route. The LAF are currently identified as partners on, and there's only one area in which we're identified as, and that's to encourage and enable strategic approach to actively manage the prevention and mitigation of uncontrolled fires on moorland. And there are other groups that work with that. At present, there is no fixed date for the first forum, and we expect to do this in the next few weeks with an event due later in 2024. The first annual monitoring report of the National Park Management Plan is in the final stages of production and will be published in July. All partners and stakeholders will be informed as soon as possible. I feel that we're only being asked to contribute on fire restrictions on moorland is very much a missed opportunity. And I would suggest that once the first annual report is released and we have time to read, note and inwardly digest, that we ask someone from the authority to come and make a presentation on the National Park Management Plan to a future forum meeting, and that we ask for our scope and vision to be included in other areas rather than just specifically fire management. But from a personal point of view, John Thompson sat on the review, the last review, and when John stepped down as chair, I took over his role. I came in very much at the end of the process, so we were just actually reviewing the document. I haven't seen any of the delivery information, and I feel very much that the LAF have been kept out of the loop, and that there are a lot of wise heads around this table that would be able to contribute to the delivery. And I think that that's something that perhaps we should look to address at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Agreed. And it does seem odd that the only place where the LAF is specifically mentioned as a stakeholder is under fire. I suspect I would hope that's more an omission of us being included under others. But the result is then that we look like we're not needed to be consulted on. So I think you're right that, yeah, we should take that up and hopefully, yes, ask someone to come and talk. Agree. Come and talk to us about it.
Just grumbling to myself.
Okay.
I was thinking about that fire one, because you're already a statutory consultee on any long-term restrictions for fire anyway. So I don't really get that. And yeah, it does definitely seem like an omission to me. And I think it will be, I think we'll take that forward through the minutes, yeah.
Yeah. And the point where the annual report comes out seems a good point to do it as well. Agreed. Thank you, Charlotte. Martin?
Chair, I was just going to bring everyone's attention, that it's probably all ready, but the Campaign for National Parks has produced a report this year, a health check report, Nature Recovery. It's entirely positive, but that might be worth also feeding in with the national, anything we do for the National Park Plan as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. I think that covers everything. Oh,
in the excitement of electing or agreeing a rotating chair, I forgot to elect vice chair. I'm pleased to say we have the existing joint vice chairs have agreed to carry on. So it's just a simple case of rubber stamping that. If everybody's happy for Charlotte and Martin to remain as joint vice chairs for the next 2 years, please stick your hand up. Thank you very much. Unanimous.
that's great. Thank you, Mike.
Which just leaves me just one little thing. If you just bear with me a minute. This is Louise's last meeting.
I am coming to the next one. I just won't be sitting here. Talk amongst yourselves. Oh, thank you very much.
As I said, it was great that Louise has stood in as chair for 2 years. I'm personally very grateful. But on behalf of the forum, we get your card and some flowers to take. Thank you very much. I know you're staying on as member, but thank you very much.
Yeah. I'd like to thank my family, the director, the editor. No, it's been a pleasure, and I will be at the next meeting. So, yeah, thanks everyone, and go and have some lunch. Thank you.
The date of the next meeting, 16th of October. Theme, Health and Wellbeing. Chair, Charlotte. Thank you very much. Meeting over. Lunch, we have to be out of this room by 1:30. So I suggest if you're going to stand around chatting for a bit, if we could do that sort of in the garden room would be helpful and we can get this place cleared up. Thank you very much.